Gloria shifted down to Lupus, padding over to the middle of the clearing. She closed her eyes and breathed it all in. She allowed all her senses to inform her of any imbalance skewed towards the worm in the area. If its influence was felt here, or someone under its thumb did this, we would know. But senseworm, from my understanding, isn't a scent per se. You can't just sniff a trail or track it all the way back to its source. It just lets you know it was here through weird sensations. Experts in the technique can do a lot with the information. Apparently, the worm has generals called male djinns, each corrupting the world in their own different way. I'm no expert myself, but I've heard names like the Nameless Angel of Despair, the Faceless Eater, or the Caliph of Pain. Apparently there's even a lawyer, the Honorable Maine Dubois or something. Sounds like a bunch of cool folks to spend the weekend with, right? Anyway, the point is, if you know your shit, you can tell which one's influence is at work, and from there, if you know your shit even more, you can make educated guesses towards what you're dealing with. We, however, do not know our shit that well, but we will be able to eliminate the possibility of a regular Joe. I taste metal. I feel calm, methodical, like I'm carefully crafting a piece of art. I hear a drip, a slow, steady drip. By the sound, it can't be water. It's thicker. Could be oil, but it's probably blood because, of course, it is. It's gotta be. Something wasn't right. Scratch that. A lot of things weren't right. But it wasn't what we were expecting. Sarah had told us gorehounds often start with animals. She also said they were all about the slaughter. Nothing methodical about that. Maybe they start methodical, and then they lose it once they merge with the Bane. Who the hell knows? Still, there was one more detail we didn't like. At least one of these kills was recent. A day at the most. But the gorehound was dead. Sure, these traps were elaborate. It could be that something had been trapped in advance but only died the day before. None of us were super convinced. We wanted the horrors to be done, but we could not take the chance. This needed to be investigated, so we spoke to the Wormfoe, a verbose Fenrir fellow called Thunderdrop, and Sarah to get their input. Maybe this was something else, something they were familiar with. But it didn't ring any bells with either of them, so Sarah took us to the Umbra using the Cairn's Heart, a place where the barrier between the physical and the spiritual worlds are so thin, crossing over is just a matter of willing it so. In the Umbra, the Cairn of the Shadows by Firelight was a slightly unsettling place. It was named after a famous Galliard gift, which allows a storyteller to conjure up actors made up of shadows and dreams to act out a reenactment of the story being told. Listeners get swept into the tale, becoming participants in the story themselves, as if literally possessed by the tale. It sounds terrifying, but it's actually a truly remarkable experience, letting you live through the events, the legends, almost like you were actually there. But here, just walking in the Umbra within the Bond is a very similar experience. If you care to listen and let it happen, spirits and things, shadowy and dream things, just like the gift, will sometimes gather. I've spent many nights doing just that myself. The scenes they show you usually depict the Sept's past, but I've seen events that couldn't be anywhere near here over the years. Many investigations into the worm's doings started because someone paid attention at the right time. But that wasn't why we were there. Sarah had a network of spirits she kept in touch with on the regular. They kept her in the know of many secrets on the Sept or nearby. They didn't quite reach out as far as the kill site, so they didn't know anything, but they agreed to keep an eye out just in case the perpetrators came back. It wasn't going to be much immediate use. So we had little choice but to take her there. A forest in the Umbra is very different from real-world ones. To start with, there's much more of it. It feels like it never ends. It's all bigger, more primal, vibrant with life. Trees are larger, and within them you can see glowing robed figures. Those are called the Glade Child. In the right circumstances, fantastic. fantastic sources of information. They can see everything around them. When we got to the place, we saw the Glade Child's glow were weaker. The robed figures seemed exhausted. Most spirits can't talk to us directly. They communicate through streams of imagery and concepts that only make sense to them. That's not a concern with our Gaian patrons, like our pack patron, the North Wind. They have learned the Geru tongue long ago. Some even speak human languages. They had to. Otherwise they wouldn't be able to guide us on our spiritual journeys. But a lot of the time, the random spirits you encounter on the roads won't understand you, and vice versa. That's why you need a good thurge. Any of them worth their salt will know a little gift called spirit speech. With it, they can actually interpret the stream of imagery into, well, if not words and sentences per se, at least into something that resembles a form of communication. We let Sarah do her thing, making sure Jane paid attention. Of course, she didn't know the gift, spirit speech, but she stood next to the Master Thurge. She saw the streams of thoughts and senseless imagery. Sarah very patiently spoke to both the Glade children and Jane, helping her make a little sense out of it all. Jane bawled. Suddenly, out of nowhere, not out of anger or sadness, but pure relief. Her nightmares, the outbursts of imagery which had always terrified her as a kid, the things she'd blocked out all of her life, convinced she was utterly mad. This was it, and it made sense. It was like a dam of raw emotion broke inside of her. We didn't know what to do. We had no damn clue what was going on, but Sarah did. She gestured us into silence to let Jane process this surge of simultaneous grief and relief. The Glade children felt her pain, blessed creatures. They extended arms of comfort that could never reach her shoulders, hands that could never wipe away her tears. But they tried. They even sang, I think. There was a sound for sure, whatever that was. Soon it was Jane who spoke to them, asked them about themselves, what they were. She could have just asked Suncaller for the knowledge, but this was something she needed to do. Neither the teenager nor the spirit understood each other. Not yet, anyway, but they connected. And, of course, the older third did translate the important bits. It was all very moving, really. In the end, we did learn a few useful things. The perpetrator was another teenager. It wasn't the thing Jane had killed because they'd been here for the latest kill, which meant something else was out there. Another for more, or about to be one, a few days apart. Surely the dancers had to be involved somehow. We just didn't know enough. But someone did. Someone who would likely come back, right here, soon. We moved deeper into the woods, stepped sideways back into reality, and stayed out of sight, trusting in Suncaller's spirit network to warn us when the prey would draw near. If it had fully turned, we'd kill it. If not, we'd cleanse it, unclenching the worm's talons from around their souls. But just how would we do that? Asked Jane while we were waiting. The rite of cleansing, replied Sarah. The what now? There are rituals, spirit magic, if you will, that we can do, I answered. You mean gifts? She said. No, Sarah answered, and I was happy to let her explain the spirit stuff. Gifts are tricks you can learn to do. We learn them from the spirits, but once you know how to do it, it comes from you. They are usually not very complex either. You just sharpen your claws a certain way to activate razor claws, or, like spirit speech, you sort of just know how to interpret it all. A ritual, however, is much more involved and requires the power of spirits to work. Through the proper gestures, words, and ingredients, we plead the spirit world to empower our ritual and hope they reply. Rituals are a daily part of our culture. Many of us greet the sun each day. and greet the moon each night. Those show proper respect to the spirits, and in return helps us do things a little bit easier. Greeting the sun each morning, for example, can grant one the blessing of Helios, the spirit of the sun, which helps us sense the Wyrm's influence. Other rites are much more practical, like the rite of talisman dedication, which allows us to attune objects so they shift with us, like Horus did with your clothes. That sounds cool, Jane said. After all that, how come you know rites like that, Horus? Isn't it a thurge kind of deal? You would think so, but no, I replied. There are many types of rituals, actually, and some fall into the specialty of other auspices. Rites of accord often have to do with balance, such as the rite of cleansing, and those are most often known by thurges, yes. Same thing for Karen rites, which obviously have to do with taking care of a Karen or taking advantage of living on one. There's also mystic rites, which do all sorts of cool magical effects, like tracking people, binding spirits to objects, summoning spirits, traveling to different layers of the Umbra, and all that jazz. Again, those are mostly third stuff. Yes, but some are just very practical to know, like talisman dedication. It's a mystic rite, but a lot of folks like me know it just because you never know when you're going to need it. That's right, Sarah picked up from there. But there are many rituals that you and I will rarely need. Rites of death, for example, have to do with mourning and helping the dead on their way. Those are often known to Galliards, who have strong connection to the past and ancestor spirits. Philodox specialize in the rites of punishment, essential to their function. Overall, Arons and Ragabash have the least need of mastering any rites, but some do, nonetheless. And the rite of cleansing, Jane said, piecing it all together, is an accord rite. So that's usually down to us, thurges, and it washes away the Wyrm's influence? Pretty much, yes, agreed Sarah. The Wyrm works slowly and sneakily. It worms its way into a person's heart. Many don't know it's happening. They just get a little angrier each day, a little more desperate, a little more paranoid. Some resist, of course, but others just don't realize it's happening until they are too far gone, consumed by that influence, and they give in. A rite of cleansing, it won't save a person if they have already merged with the Bane. Nothing can save them then, but if there's still some ways to go, the rite should give them clarity, free of the Wyrm's taint, free to choose a different path, fix what's been broken, do better, or not, but it will be their choice. We waited 4 hours. Jane had to check in with her mom a few times. We'd been gone a while, and we were really stretching our patience now, but this was important, more educational than any story I could come up with. No storytellers can win against real life. So we bought time and waited until Sarah's head tilted, her focus elsewhere as she was listening to something's voice coming from another world. We all grew silent. Spirits say she's here. We do not have much time. We surrounded the trap master, all of us in Hamid form so as not to breach the veil. All except Firehound, still in lupus and out of sight God knows where. The perpetrator was indeed a teenage girl. She was carrying an unconscious child. We were about to pounce when a voice stopped us. Jane's voice. I heed it. Well, fuck. They knew each other. Of course they did. Jane, you shouldn't be here. That wasn't in the plan, Edith said. Wrong. Very wrong. The plan's working perfectly. Just not yours, Jane replied. So, what are you going to do? Report me? The girl offered, disdain in her voice, like the whole notion was a joke, which it was. Authorities couldn't handle a nascent Fomor. Step away from the kid, Edith. And this doesn't need to get nasty. Oh, you don't know nasty. Not yet. But I can show you. I will show you. Edith grinned, a decidedly evil expression, filled with malicious intent. The girl wasn't tall or buff the way gorehounds had been described. Didn't fit the profile in the least. She seemed, in fact, more of the intellectual, bookish type. She was either not transformed yet, or she was something else entirely. Sarah stepped in. I'd listen to her if I were you. Just walk away from the child. Edith's expression grew tenser. She looked around, saw me and Gloria. She looked past us, to her kill area, what was left of it anyway. If she felt anything in a moment, she didn't let it show. All we saw in her features were her eyes darting around, calculating. Apparently, when she did the math, she determined that she was fucked anyway and might as well go for broke. She dropped the child, some kid around 6 or 7, and went for the kill. There was a big splash of blood and a scream of pain. Hers, actually. Thank you, Firehound. The clenched teeth of a 100-pound white wolf held her end back. She kneeled over, overtaken by the pain. Jane dashed and grabbed the kid, still unconscious. Gloria stepped in, pinning Edith down like it was nothing. When Firehound let go, I asked him to follow the scent to get the kid back into town before he woke up. Hopefully no one would be the wiser. That left me, Jane, Sarah, and Gloria with Edith. Suncaller took charge, and we fell in, following her instructions. Gloria just kinda continued to hold her down. Jane was given a torch and was told to wave it around as she drew a circle in the ground with her foot. Meanwhile, I was told to do my best to be intimidating, screaming vigorously at the Wyrm to leave this girl the fuck alone. Sarah drew a willow branch, dipped it in a bowl of pure water. I still have no clue where any of those things came from, by the way, and sprinkled the girl with brisk movements. When the circle was done, Jane joined me in the screaming department. Release this child from torment, we yelled. Free her mind from your toxin. Begone, tormentor. Good old Rite of Cleansing classics. Edith yelled too, swearing by all the gods that she'd kill us all, one by one, that everything we loved would suffer long before she allowed them to die. You know, a normal fun weekend. When she stopped screaming her lungs out, we knew something was happening. Sarah continued to sprinkle, brisker somehow, fiercer. She meant business now, channeling all the cleansing energy of the spirit world into her work. Edith's eyes rolled back into her head. She screamed one last time, something out of this world, something evil, relinquishing a hold they could no longer maintain. She jerked forward violently. Even Gloria couldn't stop it, but she tried, real hard. I'm pretty sure I heard the girl's shoulder pop. When she lifted her head back up, she was crying black tears, and 2 gashes had appeared on the side of her face. None of us had slashed her. We were all in Hamid form. Something did that, though. Hell if I knew what it was, or how. A heavy silence fell. We let go of her. She rolled into a fetal position and cried. She bawled. Ugly tears. Jane went to try to soothe her. Sarah went next. Hush, child, she said, all motherly while washing away the black stuff staining her cheeks. Her gashes were gone too. Sarah had healed them thanks to one of her gifts. No sense having folks asking how she'd gotten those, you know. The fewer questions asked, the better. What have I done? Oh God, what have I done? Edith cried out in utter disbelief. She's in shock, but we've done what we can, Sarah declared. Get her home, Jane, and fast. Besides, your mom can't wait much longer. You're not coming with me? Jane asked. No, Sarah replied, somewhat more urgently. We have something else to take care of. Get out of here now. We watched Jane as she carried her friend away, dreading whatever would happen next. But glad those two at least would be safe from it. "It's still here, isn't it?" Gloria said. "Yes," Sarah replied, implied concern in her voice. As if on cue, something manifested in front of us. It looked like some sort of a bug. It had 6 limbs and a bulbous carapace. Much of it was covered in barbs and impossible things like needles and razors, like nothing that could naturally grow on a shell, you know. It was horrifying and frankly disheartening. How do you even attack something like that? Claws, I guess, if you don't care about jabbing a needle in your arm in the process. Gloria would take charge now. This was a battle to the death, what she was born for. She shifted Krynos and then got the thing's attention, making sure all the hits were going her way. She dodged 2 strikes in quick succession, but dodging wouldn't get her anywhere. This thing wasn't going to get tired anytime soon. I mean, for God's sakes, it fed on violence. On the other hand, it wasn't very bright. By dodging a few more blows, Gloria maneuvered herself on the opposite side of the thing, giving Sarah and I a perfect opening. We didn't take it immediately, though. We just didn't understand the plan. Why was our heavy hitter not hitting anything? And then it dawned on me that she just couldn't. Gloria was born with brittle claws. It was how she was marked as Garu born. It manifested differently in all of them, and this was her weight to carry. A heck of an issue when your job is to kill stuff. But she made do. Her fighting style mostly involved biting or improvised weapons, anything to avoid using your claws. On an enemy with such armor, they'd be useless. She didn't have anything on hand to use as a weapon, and if she went in for a bite, she'd likely poke her eyes out, taking herself out of the fight. And now that just wouldn't do. She needed us to do the damage. When I moved, taking the hint, Sarah moved with me. Ignoring our own well-being, we went for town on the thing's back. It enjoyed the pain. It reveled in the violence. Barely made an effort to stop us. It dawned on us that Gloria was still moving as she dodged. She was drawing the thing closer to the kill zone. Seeing that our Aaron had a plan, I decided to give her a distraction. I climbed on the thing's back. I honestly can't properly describe how stupid that was. I jammed a razor through my foot, which gave me great footing, but it also hurt like hell. Still, it worked. My weight annoyed it enough to lose interest in my packmate, which darted towards the kill zone. Meanwhile, the thing twisted madly, smashing into trees, trying to dislodge me like the world's deadliest rodeo. It crushed me several times, driving blades and needles dangerously further and further into my flesh. I was not going to last much longer. Fortunately, Sarah had other plans. She climbed up and ripped me off the bane like some kind of weird furry band-aid. As soon as we hit the floor, she started healing me with one of her gifts. She did not have long, though. The psychomachiae smelled blood. Mine, to be specific, and it intended to spill more of it. Sarah dropped to all fours and rammed into the monster's face at full speed. It did not do much damage, but it was visibly dazed, buying us some precious seconds. Sarah stood her ground as the monster came back around. It snapped its vicious jaws and flashed its razor-sharp pincers, then dashed towards Suncaller. But it never reached her. Mid-run, it swerved and smashed into a tree with Gloria on its back, cutting through its carapace with a saw, busy liberating it from its head. Sarah and I took a breath. We knew the battle was over now. Finally, the deed was done. The Bane defeated. It wouldn't die. Not really. Spirits, Banes included, couldn't be killed in such a mundane way as a beheading. It would enter slumber, losing its shape, healing, for lack of a better term, and reform deep in the Umbra, in the realm that saw it first draw breath. And one day, it would come back to wage war on us again. Or rather, it would have. But Sarah, again, had other plans. She quickly crossed sideways into the Umbra, where she drew the spiritual essence of the creature into herself as it was entering slumber, effectively consuming it. Sarah would get a blast of worm taint. That would be a serious bitch to cleanse. But the Bane would never, ever reform. It was gone forever. You would be able to rest for a bit, regroup, and think about what we'd learned. We still didn't know why these Fomori were spawning, or what was the link with the Black Spiral Dancers. This battle might be over, but Jane's was just beginning. Because tomorrow, well, tomorrow was a school day. This has been A Rite to Remember, Season 1. We hope you enjoyed learning about the world of the Garou through a storytelling medium. There is still a lot to talk about, and we hope you'll be back for Season 2, where we'll be covering the 13 tribes while Jane investigates her school. Will she find evidence of foul play from a certain pack of Black Spiral Dancers? All this and more next season. Thanks for listening, setmates. See you next time.